Hi folks. Well, things just continue to get crazier and crazier. What can I say? There's Keith and Kevin in the yard, folks. Keith has still got his limp, as you can see. Billy's around somewhere, not sure where. But the big boys are here today. But yeah, things just continue to get crazy. Mass distractions so people don't see what's really going on, which is a lot of what these riots and protests and autonomous zones and all this stuff is about. You know, as I said earlier on the last report, these autonomous zones, I mean, they're not really doing much in there. They're just kind of cordoning off this area and saying, well, this is a police-free zone. But the amount of push to defund the police that's happening, you've really got to question whether this is an excuse to bring in the United Nations or bring in the military. All of the dropping down on one knee that everybody's doing. I mean, there's so much ritual going on here as a result of the alleged murder of George Floyd. My God, there's so much stuff coming out about that now. He was moving on the gurney when they took him away. I mean, I wonder if he even died. I wonder if they were even cops. I mean, I wonder if any of it was real. You got to question, folks. I mean, it's just, you know, everything is backwards, folks. But like I said, a lot of it is a distraction. A lot of it is a distraction, so you don't really notice what's going on, because the whole COVID thing is still going on. And as I said, it provides the excuse they need for the second wave. Of course, they're saying now that the feared second wave is now breaking out in Beijing in China, and they're saying, what can we learn from the Chinese model again? Well, we learned a lot from the last Chinese model, didn't we? We learned to lock down the whole world and put everybody, you know, in a complete state of home arrest and crash the world economy and destroy society as we know it. That seemed to be in line with the Chinese model. I don't think that we really should be looking to China for advice, but, you know, it's just the way that media is pushing it, folks. You know, what can we learn from China? And, you know, Bill Gates is still pushing his whole vaccine thing. Speaking of vaccines, the Vaxxed bus is touring around Australia at the moment. I've been asked to mention that. I'll put a graphic in here and I'll put a link below to an article where you can hopefully go and find out where the bus is going. Or if you just search, you should be able to find when it's coming to your town, and that will give you some information on vaccines. And good to see that that's happening in Australia as well. And the vaccine push is really going ahead, folks. You've got, I think it's Italy, France, and the Netherlands saying that they want around about 400 million vaccines. So they're going to be pushing it on their populace, folks. And that's what it's always been about, is the vaccines. You know, the whole thing has always been about the vaccines. That's what this whole fake pandemic has been for, just so they can usher in the vaccines. The question is, what is in the vaccines?
You're looking at the world's first living robots. That's right, these micro machines are in fact brand new programmable life forms that researchers believe could help clean microplastics from our oceans, or even repair organs inside our bodies. Measuring less than 1 millimeter wide, these xenobots, as they're formally known, were created by researchers from the University of Vermont and Tufts University. Using stem cells harvested from the embryos of the African clawed frog and a sophisticated computer algorithm, they generated a blueprint design that allowed the team to then build a new form of life that has never existed before. Stem cells were first differentiated into skin and heart cells. The skin cells were chosen for their capability to bond together to form the passive architecture of the xenobot, while heart cells were selected for their ability to contract and relax, with the goal of manufacturing a type of tiny engine that would propel the xenobots. After observing the natural dynamics between the skin and heart cells, the data was fed into an evolutionary algorithm run on a supercomputer. Based on this data, the algorithm was able to generate millions of different cell configurations to test for a desired outcome, in this case, locomotion. And so began the test for survival. Only the fittest configurations advanced to the next stage, where their designs were then crafted into better digital models, microsurgery on heart and skin cells to create their novel organisms. Novel organisms. And voila, the researchers created their first xenobots. The biobots could propel themselves, moving in straight lines or in circles. They could work together, herding loose particles into tiny heaps. And when cut open, the xenobots healed themselves. Cells are incredibly intelligent. There are still so many things that we don't know about how they work. Like, how do they communicate to build complex bodies, or even heal? If we could decode those signals, scientists could build smarter robots with pre-programmed tasks that would be biodegradable and biocompatible. And these little xenobots are just the first step in figuring out how to control anatomy on demand. I mean, just imagine all the applications of this type of research. If scaled up, xenobots could be used for regenerative medicine, like repairing organs, or growing body parts for transplant from the ground up. They could be created using a patient's own cells, then inserted into their bloodstream and programmed to clear the plaque from clogged arteries or to detect cancer. But the applications aren't just limited to the medical field. The team also envisions assigning individual tasks to a swarm of xenobots to collect microplastics from the ocean or search and collect radioactive contaminants. Now, a world full of custom, planet-saving xenobots sounds really cool, but you may have already asked yourself about the ethical implications for creating a totally new form of life. And you're not alone. The team has fully acknowledged that future iterations of xenobots could include nervous systems, blood vessels, or even reproductive parts. And it's these additions that are prompting many to wonder if xenobots should be considered more than just machines. There's also the tiny fact that the research is partially sponsored by DARPA's Lifelong Learning Machines program, which again has left some observers questioning the future direction of this research. However, the research team is open and encouraging of these ethical discussions in the public domain, in the hope that policymakers can keep up and implement the right regulations as this science progresses. Right now, the xenobots are still really basic and currently restricted in their reproductive abilities. And in terms of scalability, as we've just learned, these bots aren't exactly easy to create, requiring hours of microsurgery just to create one. The next phase of the research is to develop a xenobot capable of carrying a payload using a patient's cells to deliver medications deep within the human body without eliciting an immune response. So ultimately, these xenobots are just the first steps in trying to understand how life starts, perhaps one day providing scientists with the ability to control exactly how life forms. For more robotic topics, check out this focal point on a robotics lab that's investigating the idea of artificial consciousness.
Now, when you look at other things as well, such as DARPA's hydrogel.
At DARPA, I am an active duty Army infectious diseases physician and have specialized in addressing biological threats that can either be engineered or naturally occurring, such as Ebola or pandemic influenza. Today we're going to be talking about one of the technologies that I actively manage, a company called Profusa, which is aiming at achieving tissue-level continuous health monitoring. Through the SBIR program, we funded them to solve an incredible technical challenge that no one else had been previously able to solve. The key innovation that was presented to us is they said, why can't we make a chemical substance that's really identical to what's underneath the skin, what we call the subcutaneous tissue, so that your body doesn't recognize it as a foreign body response. It just incorporates itself into the tissue. And we have a lot of examples now where a sensor put right underneath the skin can sense things like oxygen and other chemicals that are very important to our metabolism. And not just sense that for a day or a week or even a month, but we imagine that sensing these parameters can go on for a period of years. One of the most important applications to us is so that we can improve the health of our worldwide deployed military force. We feel a strong sense of obligation that if we're going to ask somebody to be deployed and to carry out their mission, that we want to keep them healthy. And this technology will give us a way to monitor if someone is getting sick. We imagine that we would be able to sense that very early and therefore prevent them from getting sick and prevent their complications, allow them to stay healthy and continue to carry out their mission. In addition, if our technology translates into general health benefit, we're very excited about that. So, in other words, we fund those national security applications. The company finds private sector partnership funding for that general health benefit. And we see it as really a win-win as this technology develops.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that they can put in these vaccines, folks. And, and it's all to do with transhumanism. It's all to do with Agenda 21, 2030. If you look at the defunding of the police, this is all to do with Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 as well. They're turning cities into unsafe zones, breaking down the infrastructure, causing chaos. And like I said on the last report, sorry, clearing my throat a lot, but on the last report, I said that the destabilisation that's happening in these major towns is going to stop the food supplies running even more. And it isn't the whole town that's being destabilised. You'll find that in Minneapolis, it's just one little section, one little block. Same in most places where there's these so-called riots happening. It's just one little block. You get a few hundred people in there smashing things and lighting fires, and you bring the media cameras in and you make it look like the whole city's on fire when it isn't. You pan the camera back and you find that it's just one little city block where people are. So, it creates that whole spectacle for the media to be able to play things exactly the way they're playing them. But yeah, the second wave is definitely what they're pushing. And as I said, they're going to use the protests and the marches as an excuse for this to happen. They're really making sure that Queensland has a lot of attention here in Australia as well. The Queensland Premier is now being likened to George Floyd's murderer, right? Saying the Queensland Premier has her knee on the neck of businesses in Queensland by keeping the borders closed. So this is the way they're playing it. They can bring the race card into everything that they're doing. And they're going to open the borders now, Queensland borders, on July 10th, they say. So they're going to string it out for another 4 weeks and just let people suffer a bit longer for no reason whatsoever, just to try to gain a little bit of validity for their scam, and also to bring attention to Queensland, I would say. So when the second wave comes, we'll probably see it break out here. Probably see something happening in Queensland anyway, some sort of a false flag, something that they're going to do to bring attention to this state. I mean, that's why I think there's so much attention on it now. It's the way there were so many people predicting a false flag in Seattle. For months, people were saying, watch out, Seattle, something's going to happen in Seattle. There's going to be a terror attack or something. A lot of people were predicting something in Seattle, and look what we've seen. We've seen this whole autonomous zone and everything that they've done in Seattle, which may well branch out to the rest of the country. And don't get me wrong, folks, I mean, I'm all for removing the police from society, but, the way things are being done, it's a setup, it's a scam. The Black Lives Matter movement, people who actually do care about Black lives are being completely co-opted and scammed and led into this whole political ideology. And speaking of George Floyd again and his family, the fundraisers that they've done, I think when you combine all the fundraisers together, I think they've raised something like $14 million now, the family of George Floyd. And like I said, there's so much stuff coming out. I mean, it's debatable whether the guy even died. You got to wonder whether the whole thing was even just set up. George Floyd's lawyer says he died in 2016 or something like that. One guy's come forward. Could be a different George Floyd. We don't know. I mean, it's such a scam, folks. Everything they do is such a scam. It's like Bizarro World. You know that Bizarro, there's Superman comics, so there was the Bizarro guy and his skin was all scaly and everything was backwards. It's like that. It's like that here today. Everything is backwards. I put out a show a couple of years ago saying everything is backwards, but it's gotten even more backwards. It just seems to continue to get more and more backwards. But yeah, and they're pushing it. I mean, the guy killed in Atlanta, of course, had to be a guy shot in the back in Atlanta. They didn't just shoot a guy. I mean, they shoot people all the time. But no, they didn't just shoot this guy. They shot him in the back. Shoot him in the back, folks. And of course, it's a black guy. They shot him in the back. It isn't a guy shot by the police. It's a black man shot by the police. They always have to do that. They always have to put the racial card in there So people are always aware that it's a black man, not just a man. You can't just have people shot by police. They've got to have the racial card in there, folks. They bring the racial card into everything, every single thing that they can. But like I said, a lot of it has been mass distractions from the whole COVID, social distancing, social tracing, second wave, everything they want to do. And the second wave will come. Mark my words, folks, the second wave will come, and they don't even need a second wave. I mean, it won't be a real disease. It will just be the perception of a disease, because that's all the first one was just the perception of a pandemic. It was never a real pandemic. Was it, Brian? It wasn't a pandemic, was it, Brian? What do you think, Keith? It wasn't a pandemic, was it, Keith? I don't like Keith having his little hobble, his bad leg. It's a bit sad to see. And here's Billy and the crew. Billy and the girls. What are you doing, Billy? Yeah, but it's just the perception of a pandemic. They don't need a real pandemic. They didn't need one on the first event, and they don't need one on the second event. Although it could be, as we've discussed, it could be related to 5G, it could be related to the vaccines. I mean, there's any number of things they can do. I mean, just the fact that they've had people stuck indoors wearing these masks and thereby damaging their immune systems. And these are even being legislated in some places that you have to wear these masks. And again, folks, if any person is asking you to wear these masks, any politician, they're claiming it's good for your health or it's protecting your health, ask them for proof of claim, because there isn't any. These things actually damage your health. They block up your airways, they prevent you breathing fresh air, they create a viral load in front of your mouth that you're breathing in, spit and stuff all day that's coming out of your mouth. You're breathing through all this all day, you're making yourself sick. People staying inside, they're not getting enough sunlight, they're not getting enough fresh air, and they're not coming in contact with other people. So this in itself is going to make people sick. And that's really been what it's about, to bring in this social isolation protocol, and to stop calling it social distancing. It's not, it's social isolation, human isolation, and to bring in the excuse for the vaccinations, which are, well, as we saw before, God knows what the vaccinations really are. Dr. Andrew Kaufman says that they're altering your DNA through these vaccinations. 600 doctors now appealed to Trump to roll back all these measures and cancel all this lockdown and stop everything they're doing. The suicide rate is through the roof. The mass casualty and the mass casualties that we're seeing are being caused by the lockdown itself. All these politicians that are supporting it, folks, even this parasite we've got masquerading as a politician in this country, whatever its name is, or in this state, whatever its name is, that's keeping these borders closed, it's just doing it to save face. It's just doing it to continue the scam and to make it, seem believable to people, like she's actually concerned when she couldn't give a shit about anybody. If she could give a shit about anybody, she wouldn't have been supporting this scam to begin with. She would have called it out for what it is. Same as that parasite, Barra Jerkoff in New South Wales, that thing, maintaining the social distancing down there. Break the social distancing rules, folks. It's not social distancing, it's social isolation. There's no reason for it other than to dehumanise you. And if you don't push back against this, it's going to become the new normal, and we can't allow it to happen. Because you don't want to live in a world like that. You don't want your children growing up in a world like that. And if you are sending your children to a school which is practicing social distancing at that school, then you are subjecting your child to a system of child abuse, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And any politician, any school that's promoting this, you should be ashamed of yourselves. And the parents need to pull their children out of those schools. Create your own schools. Go find somewhere in the country that's a nice place and by the river, and create your own schools and educate your children the way they should be educated. Not in this whole government indoctrination control camp, because that's what it's all about, folks, And pay attention to what's going on, because, we're heading for a situation of massive food shortages, as I said, and the second wave. And the second wave, the lockdown is going to be far more extreme than the lockdown that we've just allowed ourselves to go through. if we don't start pushing back now and realising that this social distancing, this social isolation, all of the stuff to do, they wouldn't have gone to all the trouble to put all these marks on the shopping centre floors and all these lines and all these crosses everywhere if it was just a temporary thing, folks. All these surveillance that they're rolling out, heat sensors that they're rolling out in supermarkets now, heat sensors in shopping malls.
When our visitors arrive at site, there'll be 4 triggered doors that will be operational. We will have a security presence and some customer service personnel that will be able to assist at any needs of the customer.
Good morning, welcome to Into Lakeside.
We're going to utilise technology to track the amount of people that come backwards and forwards out of our centre. And through that information and through our heat mapping service, we'll be able to monitor where they're going once they're in the centre.
Whoa. Oh, hold up there, Chief. What did you just say? I just want to clarify that.
We're going to utilise technology to track the amount of people that come backwards and forwards out of our centre. And through that information and through our heat mapping service, we'll be able to monitor where they're going once they're in the centre.
Yeah, I thought I heard right. So just to be clear on this, we've been asked to cleanse our hands as we go into each shop. We've been asked to socially distance, socially engineer ourselves. We've been asked to be okay with all these signs around, constantly reminding us of what we should do. To now jumping onto having heat sensors tracking us. Where did that come from?
The mall itself will have a one-way system, and then when you get to the end of the malls, in certain locations we've got roundabouts, as we're calling them, so people follow the pathway with the decals on the floor.
These terms just keep getting better, don't they? Bubbles, and now it's people roundabouts, just in case you forgot which direction you need to be going. What does it remind you of?
We've taken away all of our seating to stop gatherings of visitors, and whilst we've taken it all away, we do have some specific chairs that we've got available to us at strategic points around the centre should anyone start to feel unwell during the course of their visit.
Of course, it has to be related to COVID-19, doesn't it? People don't just get unwell anymore, especially when you're in a shopping centre or around other people. No, it's not just about feeling a little bit lightheaded from maybe not having some lunch or something like that. No, you've got seating areas now, because if you start to feel unwell, it has to be related to COVID-19.
Outside each store, we put some graphics on the floor that say a starting point, and then we put 2 metre distancing measures in there, and then we're working in conjunction with each store so they will manage their queues from the front as a one-in, one-out system.
Crossing only allowed at certain points. Crossing points. You can shove this stuff where the sun don't shine. I'm certainly not rewarding this socially engineered environment with my money. I'm not fueling it. I won't be visiting these places and spending my money there. It just won't happen. And until enough people start to understand and recognize that that's how it works, that money makes the world go round, then these measures will continue to be enforced. But while they have heat tracking sensors and whatever else that they've got going on at the minute, who knows where that information's going, who knows what information they've got. While all this still continues to exist, and you can forget about getting my money. It really, really is as simple as that. So keep doing it. And if enough of us don't spend in these places, then they'll soon get the message.
One way walking in shopping malls, you've got to walk in one way and stay on one side of the... Are you serious? You know, you've got to break all of these rules, folks, because they're just rules. They're not legislation, they're just rules. And if you allow them to continue, then it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Once this goes in play and people don't push back, if people can't see how they're being corralled and led and made to walk around like sheep and cover their faces with masks and can't see there's anything wrong with it and think any of this is being done for their safety or for their health. I don't know, folks. They've got rocks in their heads. So it's up to us to do know and do see the truth, to push back, break the rules, and if people question us as to doing so, ask why. Ask why we need to comply with these rules, which are obviously damaging our health, how it has become possible for politicians to legislate the causation of harm, and ask people to provide us with proof of the claims they are making that any of this is being done for our health. It's important, folks. I think that sort of action is far better than taking over cities and declaring autonomous zones, especially when you're being led by communist groups such as the Sunrise Movement and the infiltrators into the Black Lives Matter movement, the Antifa demonstrators. Antifa is a very violent group, folks. People who are involved in Antifa and don't think it is a violent group, well, it is. It's a fascist, communist, socialist, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they're all the same. They're all different forms of totalitarianism, folks. It doesn't matter whether it's socialism, whether it's fascism, whether it's communism, whether it's democracy. I mean, they're all forms of totalitarianism. None of them are freedom. And that's what we need, freedom. And we're not going to get it by, riots and violent protests and allowing ourselves to be led by these groups that want to lead us. We could change the world in a day if we would just stop tolerating wrong behaviour. So many people have said it. Mark Passio has been talking about it for years. Go and watch Mark Passio's natural law seminars. Very interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's so simple to change things, folks. The problem is people can't see the forest for the trees because the answer is so simple that people just don't believe it. They look for the remedies externally to themselves when it's all within. It's all within. This whole thing is a reflection, folks. And even our response to it is a reflection. We're out there rioting, screaming and burning down and attacking inanimate objects when all we have to do is change the way we interact with people, change what's in our heart space. The whole world will change. We could do it in a day. Like I said, it's so simple, people can't see the forest for the trees. But anyway, folks, that's about all I have to share to you today. I got so much on. There's been a whole bunch of people who've written to me requesting interviews as well. And look, I've lost some of the emails. If you could please write to me again and I'll organise that. I'm sorry, I haven't meant to been ignoring people. It's been a real workload trying to keep up with this. This is why I haven't done videos for a couple of days. I've been trying to keep up with the workload, just answer emails and try to get some cleaning up done around the house and just get on with my everyday life, rather than letting this be such a complete focus, which is what it's become in the last couple of months because it's just been snowballing. So yeah, any interview request, if you could please send me those requests again, that would be wonderful because yeah, I've just unfortunately lost your emails in the pile. So yeah, sorry about that. But thank you everyone. Thank you for joining in and listening today. Thank you for all the kind emails you do send me. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters. I couldn't do any of this if it wasn't for you. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Please take very good care until then. In Lakesh.